10,251 miles, some component failures, extreme beatings, many tanks of fuel, 3 sets of tires. This is the most comprehensive review of the Royal Enfield Himalayan that is on the internet up to date. The brakes are still extremely terrible, even if you change the pads. They're really terrible off-road, especially when you encounter moisture or a muddy section. Strictly speaking about the engine and transmission, yes, they are durable. Also, the clutch plates are very strong. The power is extremely anemic, especially at altitude. If you live at 6,500 feet above sea level or higher, I would highly recommend looking at another bike. The ground clearance was adequate for most situations. I did have a few issues with the shock mount. It hangs a little bit too low, and the bike would high center on that. I will take this bike on another journey, but it will have to avoid highways because it is not physically painful to ride on the highway. However, if you get any sort of headwind or an actual incline, it can be painful for the people around you having to pass you. The stock skid plate suffered some deformation due to its weak material composition. However, even with the weak material composition, it performed its duty in protecting the vital parts of the motorcycle. The answer is yes, you can jump this motorcycle. I jumped it a lot, and it's fine. This bike is not a chick magnet per se. However, if you're into attracting older men or dudes, this is the bike for you. At any opportunity, somebody is going to ask you about the bike, and 100% of that time, it's going to be a man. An older man, generally speaking. I have caught people taking selfies with this bike, so it is very attractive, but generally, it's just going to be men asking you about it. So yes, there were some failures. So the first failure that I encountered was the shifter linkage had sheared or been pulled and snapped. So whenever I started reviewing the actual component that failed, it looks like it had been tensile pulled. And this happened while I was shifting. So I was shifting and then I didn't have a shifter. So there's a couple of reasons that may happen. There may be a defect from the manufacturer, cheap material composition, which I do believe that this suffers from, or improper use. And obviously shifting is its proper use, so I would see that as not being applicable on this failure. The shifter had actually fell off going down the highway and was slapping me in the leg constantly. I thought I had caught some road debris, but it turns out it was actually my shifter, and thank God the bolt was still in there. Following that, the speedometer cable, I hit a bird and it sheared it off, so that was, it's been the last, there was a 700 mile stint in between before I kind of rigged it up that I didn't have a speedometer, which is fine because I kept track of the mileage. However, keeping track on the speedometer thing, the speedometer display, the actual cutout, is actually rotating and vibrating inside of the speedometer, inside of the instrument cluster. So that is another thing. Another failure with the chain. So I properly maintain my chains. That's the first thing that I do in the mornings before I set out on the journeys, and that's a 300 to 500 mile interval that I like to do these in. So I always properly maintain the chain. That's the number one thing. The master link on this chain had actually sheared, which I had never seen before, and it sheared in a way that it kept the chain together. However, when it would start moving, it would start wearing the sprocket at an exponential rate. So I had to replace the chain and the two sprockets because it wore them so fast within probably 600 miles. So I had to replace that. The handlebars actually bent a few times. They have a very small modulus of elasticity, and they're not very hard because they're made out of a very soft and thin material. So if you drop the bike or try to pick the bike up by the handlebars at any point, you can almost guarantee that they're going to be bent. One of the final failures that I had was the kickstand spring. The little mount on the kickstand itself actually broke off. I'm not exactly sure why or when this happened. However, you can see where the mount is, and there is no nipple there to hang the spring on anymore, so I had to use a hose clamp at the time to pull the spring down and then hold it so the kickstand will actually have some sort of tension to stay up. So that's another issue that I found and failure point of this motorcycle. No, it is not a great bike. It's just good. Yes, I would buy this motorcycle again.